Hey guys, hope you're doing good today. I'm having a struggle. It's raining and I'm having some hip and leg issues, so appreciate you. You could pray for me. But the show must continue. Today we are going to talk about a brand new resource I developed to help you plan out your startup business model. So in the past, I've talked to you about the concept of a business model canvas, and it's a really popular document that's used at a lot of incubators, a lot of accelerators to help startup founders plan out the various aspects of their business model so that they can think about those ahead of time. It's kind of in lieu of doing a business plan. When you do a business plan, typically we're talking about a very large document, anywhere between 5 and 20 pages of research. And usually a business plan is better suited for a little bit more of an existing business. You can do them for a startup, but because most startups, their model and the pieces of their model changes so often, changing that in a business plan can be a bit onerous. So we suggest a lot of times, a lot of professionals that work with startups suggest that you do a business model canvas. Over the years, I've suggested as much, and I've even done content around that model and that practice. But recently I've started to think about it a little bit differently. I'll link to a business model canvas below, but when you do this process, it seems very formal and academic. And in my opinion, as I look through a lot of the questions that are on there, they're even a little bit later stage. I don't mean that they're later stage for a business that's in maturity, but they're a little bit further down the process with a startup founder who's has a little bit more experience and probably is a little bit further along than just an idea. So I wanted to come up with a similar process to help you when you are at the idea stage or extremely early in your process to ask the really big questions that are going to matter as you move along in the growth of your business. So let's get right to it, and I'll share some of the questions on this guide. All right, guys, so let's go through this. I'm calling it the SouthFound Startup Business Model Planner. If you're not familiar with the SouthFound company, that is my startup community and creative consulting agency where I work with startups, founders all over the world, actually helping them find their voices, helping them get exposure out in the community, help them develop business plans, pitch decks, all those different things. And so that's why I developed this startup business model planner to sort of mimic what that business model canvas does, but probably at an earlier stage even than you would fill out that business model canvas. Now, to be fair, you are going to see some consistency between my business model planner and the business model canvas. There's some similar questions that we're asking, but I am asking some other questions that I think are earlier stage and have to be answered. So starting here at the top, the idea is just to have a well thought out business model and answer these types of questions before you get too far along, so that you have started to design how this business is going to come together. And the first thing I want you to think about here is, what is your mission? And the question I'm asking is, what impact do you want to make? Whether that's on the business world, making an impact on your family, making an impact on your community, what's the impact that you really want to make out in the marketplace, out in the world? That can be for profit, that can be not for profit. It doesn't matter. It's all about you and your mission and how you want to impact the world. Also ask yourself, how long are you willing to work to see this mission come to fruition, even if you aren't getting paid? And the reason I want you to ask yourself this question is because the startup life, the entrepreneurial life, is hard. I work with lots of entrepreneurs, and we all know the failure rate. Some of them just don't make it. And oftentimes that's because they have unrealistic expectations about starting their business early and making money quickly. Yes, you can do that, especially with some lean methodology, especially with businesses that don't have a product. They just have a service to sell. It's easier to get going and make money early on. But I want you to think about what you're willing to do. How long are you willing to work toward that mission, even if you weren't getting paid? And the reason I say that is because if it's only 2 months, then you might want to go ahead and stop now. Sometimes that's pretty unrealistic. There are people who have done it, but in most cases, it takes some time to get ramped up. You're probably going to have to spend a little bit of money to make a little bit of money in some instances or some business models. So I just want you to think about, how long am I really honestly willing to do this? Look in the mirror and ask yourself, how long am I willing to do this, even if I was not getting paid. If it's a year, that's a pretty good start. If it's 6 months, not too bad. If it's a couple of months, then we need to check our expectations. All right, the next question I want you to ask, and underneath what is your mission, is will this be a lifestyle business or the next Fortune 30 juggernaut, right? So will it be the next Microsoft? Will it be the next Google? This is an important question also from a mission perspective. It's about your personal mission. It's not about what the company accomplishes so much, but what are you looking for out of this business model? Is it going to be okay with you if you launch this business and it just provides you some side hustle income? Is it going to be okay if you launch this business and it just turns into a job that you created for yourself, but you still get to work for yourself? I know plenty of entrepreneurs that that's more than satisfying for them. They do what they do. They work for themselves. They make a comfortable living. They're able to pay their bills and they're perfectly happy with that. Or does this have to be the next Facebook, the next high growth startup? If that's really what your goal is, then again, we might want to check our expectations. Those are few and far between. I'm not saying you can't do it, because you can with the right support and resources. But I want you to think about that before you even really get started. Is it okay if it's a lifestyle business, or does this have to be a high scale, high growth startup to make you happy? In the next steps, we're talking about your dream team. I made this second after your mission because if you've listened to my other content, you've heard me talk about the concept that investors in particular always invest in the team, not the idea. And the reason is because if the team can't execute on the idea, then the idea is worthless. So I want you, even from day one, to think about who would be on your dream team and why would they be on there. Because making it as a solo entrepreneur in some business models, again, lots of caveats on these statements and generalizations, but some business models require more than one team member long term, especially if they're going to be high growth. So you need to be thinking about who would be on my dream team and why. The reason I add the why question is because what a lot of entrepreneurs tell me is, well, I'm going to add all my friends to my business. Terrible idea, unless those friends have every single skill set you need and you know without doubt that they can follow your lead or be a great co-founder. Sometimes it works out with friends, sometimes it doesn't. Something you need to think about. So under this bracket, who is on your dream team, I want you to think about what skills will you need that you don't have. You may be absolutely a marketing rock star, but maybe you're not so good with technology. You may be on the flip side. You may be a great technologist, but know very little about the operations of a business when it comes to basic accounting, basic legal, basic marketing, all the different things that are required to run a business. So what skills don't you have that you really need to offset by going out and getting someone on your dream team that has that skill? If you're going to add people to your dream team, the next question is, how are you going to pay them? Are they going to work for free for a period of time so you can test them out? Are they expecting some income, some salary, whether it's a lot or a little? Are they expecting equity in the business? You need to think all these things through. It depends on the individual that you're adding, how that structure typically looks. But maybe you don't have early income or the discretionary income of your own to pay these folks. So you're going to have to compensate them in other ways. You need to be thinking about those things. And then finally, under who's your dream team is what responsibilities will each person have? As the founder, even when you add co-founders, one person kind of has to be the general, always. And so the thing I want you to think about is what responsibilities will you assign to people, and then let them be responsible for those things. That doesn't mean you don't check in. It's trust but verify. Check in and see what they're doing, but you should assign different team members responsibilities and then let them go about those responsibilities. So maybe your job as the main founder is to deal with raising investment, managing the individuals, but maybe when you bring on your friend, Jill, her job is strictly to focus on marketing. You bring on someone else, their job is finance or accounting, those types of things. So what responsibilities will each person have? Delineate those fairly clearly. In a small early stage startup, you're going to see some crossover in responsibilities, but it's still not a bad idea to put on pen to paper and get an idea of who's going to be focused on what within the company. The third thing we're going to talk about on this startup business model planner is how will you fund your growth? A lot of businesses out there fail because they don't have enough financing in place. And so I want you to focus on that early on and think about, even if you're not raising investment right now or not seeking debt finance right now, down the road, how will you fund your growth? This comes down oftentimes to personal choice? Do you like to work with investors and everything that comes with that? Or would you rather just pay interest on a loan? So will you bootstrap? Will you use debt? Will you use equity? Will you use some other form of funding? There are a variety of sources of capital out there that you can use. And so I want you just to think about that as you're designing your business model. How much funding do you need in the first place? What's the dollar amount that you need? One of the most common questions I get is, well, how do I know exactly how much I'm going to need? Oftentimes that comes down to the next question, which is, have you prepared financial projections? Have you sat down and done some projections to estimate this year, your launch year, and then subsequent years, the expenses that you anticipate having, the revenue you anticipate having all those things? Now, yes, projections are a very big guess. That's just the way they work. You can do some educated work to make those better, and I do that often with the entrepreneurs that I work with. But make sure you've done financial projections, because then that will lead you to tell you how much money you're going to need to get to profitability. And then you can answer that question about, will I use debt or equity fund that? Also, under this category, how much of your own money are you willing to risk? I talk all the time to entrepreneurs and I tell them, you should have skin in the game. I'm working with an entrepreneur right now out of Atlanta, and he's actually spent over $100,000 of his own money to get to where he is right now. Now, he has a very healthy income and he can afford to do that. But even if you can only afford to pay someone to design your logo, you should still be willing to put up some of your own discretionary money you can afford to lose, into the business. It goes a long way with investors down the road that you have risked some of your own money besides just sweat equity. And then the last question underneath here is very important to me. It's, will you keep your day job? A lot of startup founders get under the belief that they have to raise venture capital early so that they can quit and go full time. That's not always the case. Yes, it's important to have a focus on your business, especially when you have investors. But I want you to think about the idea of, if you're going to launch this business, how long will you keep your day job to have income coming in? How long will you keep your day job? At what point does the business have to get to financially for you to be willing to step away from your day job? Would you leave your day job in the first place? Some people love their job so much that they just don't ever see leaving it for this business. Maybe they're just going to spin this business up and then have somebody else run it for them and be an absentee owner. That's okay if that's your choice. I just want you to think about all these questions. Now, the next category is, who are your competitors? I do this research for clients all the time. Just finished up one for a client yesterday out of Australia, doing research on his business that he just launched. Didn't do any research ahead of time, and lo and behold, within 5 minutes of doing searches, I have found huge incumbent, well-set competitors that he's going to have to compete against. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs will tell me, I have the most unique idea in the world. There's no one doing anything like it. Most of the time, that's not true. And even if it's slightly true, there are still what we would call indirect competitors. So a crude example that you've probably heard me use before is, if you're going out for a steak, but you end up at McDonald's, McDonald's was still a competitor, even though you were after a steak. McDonald's doesn't sell steak, but you can spend that same dollar or dollars that you were going to spend out after the steak at McDonald's. So you have direct and indirect competitors. Please don't make the mistake of telling anyone that there are zero competitors out there. 99.9999% of the time, it just isn't true. And actually, you want there to be competitors. If you say that there aren't competitors, then what's happening is you are saying there's not enough demand out in the marketplace. So let's keep that in mind. Now, when you have competitors, great questions to ask are, what do you do better or different than they do? Are you going to compete on differentiation or cost, or both? What do they do better than you? It's okay to admit that a competitor does something better than you. If they do, and they've got a foothold in that market or that niche, you may want to step away and find your own. You can also ask, what unchartered waters can you sail into? This is another way of saying, what is blue ocean that you can go into? If you find that there are competitors and they're dominant in a space, dominant in a niche, what is a way that you can differentiate and find a brand new market that they haven't uncovered yet, and beat them to it, outperform, scale faster than they do, and capture market share? And I mentioned this before, will you compete on differentiation, cost, or both? Remember, with differentiation, you don't always have to differentiate in feature or solution or product. Sometimes you can just differentiate by the markets that you go into and how you market to them. And then lastly, let's talk about how you will market your business in the first place. This would be the 4 P's of marketing. So product, place, promotion, and price. And so 4 questions here. Who will produce your product or service? That should be a pretty easy one. I bet you already know the answer to that. What channels will you use to distribute it? So maybe you're making an application and you're going to put it on Google Play and iTunes and those types of things. Maybe you're developing a product and you're going to need some resellers through maybe Amazon to sell that. Thirdly, what channels will you use to promote your solution? Now, I want to pause here and say to you, the common answer I get is I will use social media marketing because it's inexpensive, and then I will have an amazing viral ad, and all of a sudden I'll be in business. Please don't fall for that. Don't just plan on social media marketing. Put together a full marketing playbook like I develop for a lot of clients that helps you determine exactly the steps you're going to take to get your product out into the marketplace. This is another common, huge failing for a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with. They just don't assume any budget, hardly at all, to promote their solution, and then they fall flat on their face. And then finally, how will you price your solution? That also oftentimes comes down to doing some market research and determining how others are pricing what they're doing, but don't just fall for looking at what they charge and them being less. You may have more feature and functionality that you need to charge more. So do your research, think about these questions. There's 5 of them I want you to go through with this SouthFound Startup Business Model Planner. This should be done before you get to a business model canvas. Still do that business model canvas when you're a little bit further along and have some of these things ironed out. I hope this helps a lot. If you have any questions, as always, reach out to me and I'll put a link to be able to download this infographic in the description. Have a good day.